Now, what we are now looking very carefully, well, some very famous the business person mentioned, his company, when they make investment, about 80% of investment is abroad, and 20% in Japan 5 years ago, because of very expensive variable yen. But these companies now rethinking, maybe in a few years, about 50-50 share is going to be going to abroad and domestic. Now, of course, this kind of behavior depends on what kind of industry you're talking about. A company like Canon was very quick to just, recovering the domestic production. But the company like Toyota or Nissan is much, much slower because they have a lot of commitment of the production abroad. So you have to be very careful for discussion. But anyway, what I want to say is the exchange rate has very important implication. Not immediate implication, but it's more long-term implication. But anyway, so this is a starting point. So I think for the Japanese economy, this is a very good starting point, at least, if you want to look at just increasing demand and increasing economic activities. Now, let me just discuss the macroeconomic side of Japanese economy. One of the very important aspects of the Abenomics is a very dramatic stimulation by the government and by the Bank of Japan. Now, it is very natural. When you have a very dramatic stimulation, there's a part of the economy which responds very quickly to that kind of stimulation. And there's a part of the economy which is very slow, which is very slow to adjust. Now, the portion which just responds very quickly, exchange rate, corporate profitabilities, or the stock prices, or even unemployment rate, as you probably know. If you look at these numbers, the performance is just dramatic. Like the Nikkei stock index increased more than 100% in the last 2 years. And unemployment rate just moved from 4.2% in 2012 to 3.6% now, almost full employment. And you probably know the corporate profit is now the largest, and other things. But unfortunately, the most important economic factors or elements, such as consumption, investment, export, is very slow to this kind of situation. And that is a very difficult part of Japanese economy. So in spite of the fact that corporate profit is the largest now, the corporate sector is very reluctant to expand their the investment. In spite of the fact that labor market is now very tight, and actually wages is increasing. You probably heard a lot that although wages increasing, prices increase much more speedily, so we have a decrease of real wage. But if you look at the data very carefully, so-called nominal wage increase last year was the highest in the last 17 years. But unfortunately, last year we had a consumption tax increase, which just provided some add-on the inflation rate. But it is very, I'm very confident this year, probably wage is increasing more than the price increase. So real wage is increasing. So I think the environment for consumer is in general very good, but still consumption is very weak. So this is a typical feature of Japanese economy. There's some part of the economy which is very quick to respond to the market, or in Japanese we say it's a neshiyasui bu분. But and at the same time there's some very important area which is very slow. So I think one of the very important aspects of the economics from now on is how we can just have a quick transfer of the heat which has already we achieved in corporate profitability or unemployment rate and other things to more important consumption and investment and maybe export. So it is, because of this, I think the government is now emphasizing the importance of wage increase. Japanese wage policy is very different maybe from ordinary countries, because we have a very formal meeting of the government and corporate leaders and labor unions to discuss about the increase of the wage. And they all think increasing wage is very important, not only because it just provides better income for consumer to just stimulate the consumption, but also constant increasing wage is a very important part of the stable, sustainable increasing prices. But this is not the first time. We had a very similar situation in 1979, if you remember well, in opposite direction. When we have a second oil crisis, we have a very serious, possibility of serious inflation. At that time, what happened is just the government and labor union and the business community discussed very seriously how we can just squeeze down the pace of wage increases. And that was actually a successful story for us to be able to just control inflation. Now we are doing different things. How we can just push up the wage so that we can have a more sustainable process of mild inflation and also providing increased income to the consumers. So I think this is the most important. As you probably know, we have a Shunto, the wage negotiation in February and March. So we see whether the government is successful to achieve this or not. And naturally, the other thing is so-called growth strategy, the third law of Abenomics. Because in order to just expand the investment, we need some kind of a reform. And again, here, corporate sector has a very large amount of profitability. They have a lot of profit, but still they are very reluctant to the investment. So we need some kind of change. But here we have to be very careful. If we read the content of the three laws of Abenomics, the third law is not growth strategies. Okay? The third law is growth strategies that promote private investment. Four words is added, that promote private investment, which is very important. So because when you're talking about growth strategy, you always have to think about two things, supply side policy and demand side policy. Now, both is very important. Without supply side policy, we cannot continue the sustainable growth forever. So labor reform is important. The agriculture reform is very important. EPA is very important. And all reform is very important. But at the same time, we know supply side policy does not have a very immediate effect. Even if we are successful to reform agriculture sector today, we cannot expect the agriculture sector to become very competitive tomorrow. We have to wait the result for maybe 3 years, 5 years.